Hello, everyone. Welcome to, we'll call this August Chief Chat. I apologize for missing a month, but it's been just a little busy here. But I did want to reach out and touch base with everybody, let them know what's going on and what we've been working on and what we will continue to work on. And one of those things is the inequality and the systemic racism that affects our communities, and in some cases can affect the policing profession. And so one of the things that we want to do is constantly have these conversations, constantly be on the lookout for ways to improve our service to the residents and to ensure that we are policing in a fair and equitable manner. Along those lines, I have recently taken the mantle as president for the Maryland Chiefs Association. And in that duty or in that position, I have had the opportunity to be part of conversations with state legislators and in some cases on the federal side as we all try to work together to craft good public policy that addresses the concerns of the community, to ensure that we are transparent, to ensure that we are more accountable. And those conversations are sometimes complicated and sometimes heated, but we will all continue to work towards the same goal. And at the end of the day, what we need to remember is that we all want the same goal and the same destination. Sometimes where the consternation comes is how do we get there, and how do we fashion that good policy that's fair to everyone and affords everyone their rights and the due process. So we will continue to work that. But what I want to do is also share locally what we're doing here for you in the city of Bowie and what our policies are. So if you remember last time we spoke, I suggested that maybe I would be going over key and core policies and just highlight them so that you know what we stand for, you know what our practices and policies are, and what we're doing to ensure that we do police in a fair and equitable manner. So today we're going to briefly touch on our use of force policy, because that's one of the biggest ones that can create the most heartache or create the most confusion or concern in the community. So we're just going to hit this briefly. It is online, and it's policy number 405, use of force. It's a very long document, so I'm not going to read all of it, but I am going to touch some highlights on some things that I know get brought up to us on a regular basis, and that are key to community members and folks alike that want to make sure that we're doing the right thing and that make sure our policies are up to date and consistent with best practices. So I'm really trying to avoid reading large passages. So I'm just going to kind of take some pieces. So the use of force by law enforcement is a matter of critical concern to the public and the law enforcement community. Officers are involved on a daily basis in numerous and varied encounters with people, and when warranted to do so may use force in carrying out their duties. So one of the things that, and again I'm going to interject myself here and there, but one of the things that we have to remember is the vast majority of our encounters do not require a use of force of any kind. I think the national average was like 2%, maybe 1% of our encounters involve any kind of use of force. But when we have to employ force, we want to make sure that we're doing it under good policy and under the constitutional rights afforded under the Fourth Amendment. So again, I'm going to jump around a little bit. It is the policy of the Bowie Police Department that each incident involving the application of any degree of physical force upon the person of another must be evaluated based upon the facts known to the officer at the time of the incident. The totality of the circumstances will be considered when reviewing use of force incidents. And we do review all of our use of force incidents. We have an executive group of the command staff that will look at body camera, look at every use of force, and we review it. Not just for policy, but also for possible training improvements and ways that we can make sure that our officers are both safe and tactically sound and using the appropriate level of force or using anything that we can to de-escalate or calm the situation so we don't have to use force. But again, anytime we have a use of force incident, We do review it, we talk about it, we talk through to see where we can improve and to make sure that our officers are acting within scope, policy, and constitutional law. Under no circumstances may the use of physical force be more than that which is necessary to achieve a lawful purposes. Officers are permitted to use the amount of force that is objectively reasonable and necessary to protect themselves or others from what is reasonably believed to be a threat of bodily harm or death, to effectuate an arrest or gain compliance. Whether the use of force is objectively reasonable shall be judged from the perspective of the officer at the time the force is used, based upon facts known or reasonably available to him or her at the time of the incident. And that comes straight from constitutional case law under Graham versus Connor. So again, one of the things we want to make sure is that our policies are within best practices and are constitutionally sound. So I'm going to jump around a little bit. And officers shall refrain from using force unnecessarily and shall prevent similarly conduct by others. The use of excessive force will subject officers to discipline, possible criminal prosecution, and or civil liability. The use of chokeholds and similar carotid holds by officers in non-lethal situations is prohibited, except when deadly force would be authorized. And when we look at some of the things that people have been sending us, like 8 can't wait, and it has 8 certain things that people want to see nationwide under policies for use of force and for policing. That's 2 of them. The use of force will subject officers to discipline. That's, of course, the use of chokeholds and under non-lethal situations is prohibited. So a lot of the things that we talked about, the 8 can't wait, one of the things is chokeholds. And so they are and have always been prohibited under our policy. So pardon the page turning, but I'm going to just kind of hop through some definitions here. Again, these are all online. I'm just pulling out bullet points to talk about. Another important thing is progression of force. Officers will consider and, if possible, employ a progression of force. The progression of force may not be possible under all circumstances. However, officers will use a reasonable level of force when force is used to obtain a lawful objective. So one of the things that people talk about is a use of force continuum. And a use of force continuum, it can be based upon, sometimes the use of force, the word continuum is semantical, but a use of force continuum is, we don't necessarily have a continuum because a continuum is by definition linear. And what oftentimes the encounters that our officers have are not linear. They don't go in a straight line. They bounce, they swerve, they move, and they're fluid. So we use a set of guidelines based upon constitutional law that incorporate a lot of the things that are in a continuum, but it emphasizes critical decision making and emphasizes the constitutional limitations of what we should be doing and how we should be doing it. So there's some factors that use to determine the reasonableness of the force, and I'm just going to jump through a few. The conduct of the individual being confronted. The officer's subject factors, size, relative strength, skill level, exhaustion, numbers of officers versus the number of subjects. The influence of drug or alcohol or mental capacity on the subject. Proximity of weapons. Availability of other options. What resources are reasonably available to the officers under circumstances? Is there good cover? Can we move back? Can we buy time and move back and de-escalate or create other options besides force? The seriousness of the suspected offense or reason for the contact with the individual. Training and experience of the officer. Potential for injury to citizens, officers, or the suspect. Special knowledge the officer has about the subject. The risk of escape, type of crime or call for service, or other exigent circumstances. And there's a note that said it is recognized that officers are expected to make split-second decisions and that the amount of time an officer has available to evaluate and respond to changing circumstances may impact his or her decisions. And that's a very important piece is when we talk about officers' interactions and how fluid they can change in a millisecond. You can be having a de-escalating conversation. You can be on the right path to a peaceful resolution when something can turn in a millisecond, and next thing you know, you're in a fight for your life. So when we look at uses of force and we look at judging them and evaluating them, that's one of the key things we have to look at is what's happening, how fast did it happen, and how much time did the officer have to make that split-second decision. So again, I'm going to skip around just a little bit. So one of the other things that we talk about is deadly force, and one of the 8 can't wait things that we're going around is giving warnings when possible. So under section 13, deadly force 3A, when possible, a warning should be given prior to the use of deadly force, and that's what we need to understand, and what we need to remember is that deadly force is the absolute last resort, and it's the absolute last thing that any officer wants to have to do. And so that, if a warning or as much time as we can give a suspect to comply, we're going to do that. And again, that is under policy, and it is one of those 8 can't wait things that we're making the rounds. De-escalation of deadly force. What we have to remember, and one of the hardest things about sometimes about policing is going from 0 to 100 miles an hour and then back down to 0 again. And this kind of encapsulates that. In situations where the officer must overcome an attack that the officer reasonably believes would produce serious injury or death to the officer or another person, the officer may use any methods necessary to overcome the attack. However, once the situation has stabilized and the threat of serious injury or death is past, the officer must once again immediately resort to approved less lethal force, tactical repositioning, slowing down situations that do not pose an immediate threat, calling for a supervisor or other resources. So again, it's incumbent upon us to take control of that situation. If it escalates and we have to use force, we do so. After that force is used, if it's able to, we de-escalate. We can't stay in that high tension, high stress moment. We have to come down. We have to try to bring everybody else down with us and keep our level of force or our level of control at the proper level, as opposed to what the situation warrants. So we're just kind of skip through here again. Again, it's a long one. And one of the things that we also get asked about is the duty to intervene. And it is and this is one of the things that we're looking at adjusting, because while it's not in the use of force, it is in our code of conduct under section CC2, intervention in cases. You may intervene if the intervening individual believes beyond a reasonable doubt that an injustice would result from a failure to take immediate action. So one of the things that we spoke about before was our policies just went through an independent review with CALEA. And we passed, we haven't got our final word for accreditation yet, but we passed both of our internal and external reviews. And one of the great things about being part of the CALEA process is that they keep track of best practices, they put out guidelines, they put out recommendations, and based upon the last round of recommendations that are coming out, we are going to be cleaning up this GO or general order a little bit to make it more directly mentioning intervening, mentioning de-escalation, and making sure that the strongest language possible is used. And don't get me wrong, they're in our policies now, but we will be looking at them to strengthen the wording and to make sure that it's absolutely clear what those intentions are. So that is our use of force policy. Again, that was a very high-level skimming evaluation of it. I strongly encourage you to get on our website to look at our policies, go through them. If you have any questions, let us know. This continues to be a conversation with you, our community, and it continues to be a constant conversation within the department to make sure that we are following guidelines, we are constantly evolving, we are constantly trying to get better. And as this conversation continues, not just in Bowie, but across the state and across the nation, it's important that we all look at where we want to be and what we want, which is fair, equitable policing and fair, equitable treatment of people of all creeds, colors, and races. And we have to remember that we're all going for the same goal. And these open conversations and these conversations that got to be frankly uncomfortable sometimes are the best way that we're going to get there. So that is it for now. We'll probably look at another policy next time. I promise I won't skip a month again. We'll be a little more diligent on it. But like I said, things get busy sometimes and the time slips away from me. But again, if you have any questions or concerns, reach out. I will say that one of the things that COVID is doing is making me realize how much I miss being in front of you guys and in front of the community and having events and seeing people and spending time with people talking. I didn't realize I was such an extrovert until I started missing you guys. So hopefully as restrictions start to lift, we'll be able to get in front of you more. One of the things I do want to talk about, or at least mention, is to keep an eye out for some notices. One of the things that we are going to try to do and we're looking to do is maybe some community roll calls. And what I mean by that is instead of having roll call for the officers in the station, we're looking at the potential for going out in the community, having a roll call out in the community and letting people know so that if they want to swing by, talk to some officers, they have a question, they want to see how a roll call works and looks and what we tell the officers and how do we prep them for their shift going in. That's an opportunity. With the COVID restrictions, sometimes we have to be a little creative, and we're working on that. So again, I know I said goodbye earlier, but I'm going to say goodbye again, and we hope to see you guys soon. Thanks.